and or read enough of the literature on Europeans to see their double talking. All right? So we're going to start off with the Out of Africa theory, but it's synonymous to the Human Genome Project because both of them are for eugenic-based endgames for white people to keep dominance and control over the educational institutions of the world and to intentionally and purposefully block you from studying the past records of indigenous history, which you think are primitive in the way of non-technical, which you could not possibly be wronger than, having that erroneous thought. The civilizations that came prior to Europeans back into antiquity were the most technologically sound institutions that we could produce at any given epoch. Anybody can slip on a banana peel, and our ancestors did that. So we are thus in this particular situation as a result of not following the best of what we had to offer. And in doing so, now we have to turn back and look at the mistakes that we have made and then counter those mistakes with the proper things to put in place. So, with that being said, what is going on with this Out of Africa theory? Well, the beginnings of this theory starts with the founders of eugenics. Most people don't look at Charles Darwin as the founder of eugenics. They look at his cousin, Francis Galton, as the founder of eugenics. But Charles Darwin and Thomas Huxley were the founders of the base of the Out of Africa theory. In the material called The Descent of Man, Darwin was the first European to speculate that humans descended from apes and, began to eventually evolve through the processes of natural selection and walk upright. And he labeled those particular great apes or hominids as African, right? And a direct quote from him from The Descent of Man says, "In each great region of the world, the living mammals are closely related to the extinct species of the same region. It is therefore probable that Africa was formerly inhabited by extinct apes closely allied to the gorilla and chimpanzee, and as these two species are now man's nearest allies, it is somewhat more probable that our early progenitors lived on the African continent than elsewhere. But it is useless to speculate on this subject for an ape nearly as large as a man, namely the Dryopithecus of Lartet, which was closely allied to the Anthropomorphus Hylobates, existed in other parts of the planet." He goes on to talk about Europe and other places. But they proposed this. So the Out of Africa theory comes from Charles Darwin. The reason why Charles Darwin is significant is because his cousin Francis Galton is the founder of modern-day eugenics, and eugenics is the concept of the self-controlled evolution of the races on this planet. The self-control, meaning that one group of people will control the evolutionary destiny of another group of people through whatever means that they're going to use, which is usually through the institution set up in a society to make sure that those particular people become an asset and a collateral for the gentry. All right? So now when you look at black people all across the planet, original people all across the planet, various nationalities, they are on the bottom. Now you say, well, there are successful black people on the planet. Yes, there are, but they are not contending with the psychological and the institutional genocide that is being implemented on them, or the banning of their natural law systems in their ancient forms or in their successful forms, in the sense that they will compete with the rest of the world for self-sustaining without the tutelage of white folks or other groups of people who are of the same gene pool as that group of people. So Charles Darwin offered this, and now you have African scholars and others who are using this eugenicist family as the basis for their scientific claims. Now, without doing a composite study on the history of Charles Darwin, one cannot understand why he would have an end game or a desire to propose such a thing when he knew from the records of the Muslims, the black Muslims that he had studied, like Al-Jahiz, who gave him his first teacher, who gave him his first lessons of the former world's concepts on the origin of man, woman, etc., from the works of Al-Jahid. Al-Jahid was a scholar of the 9th century in Arabia and then later in Baghdad, who made proposals about the origins of man and woman based on indigenous records, based on using Quranic sciences, etc. Charles Darwin borrowed from him and created what is called natural selection today and warped it away from its indigenous connotations. But my point is that the book Descent of Man first proposes this, and when you see the little pictures of the gibbons and the hominids ultimately standing up upright to look like human skeletal forms, that was proposed by anatomist Thomas Huxley, who is basically called the pit bull or the bulldog of Charles Darwin. All right. So all of these people were a part of families. Juxtaposed to that, James Watson, one of the founders of the modern templating of the DNA helix, was fired in 2007 for making a statement that peoples of African descent are less intelligent than Europeans. Why he's important is because he was working at the National Institute of Health when the Human Genome Project was crafted, and as a founder of templating the DNA helix with Francis Crick, he's also a eugenicist, all right? A knighted because of his work by Queen Elizabeth. So these are families of people. James Watson graduated from high school at the age of 14 and entered college at the age of 15 and graduated with his PhD by the time he was 22. So one of the things that I want to point out is that when we look at eugenics and we look at institutions, we are looking at people who form those institutions for their lineage and their race. So what do you have? And why are you so proud of arguing about things where you don't even have an institution to lay the base to make arguments? So I'm warning you, don't call in tonight with that craziness. All right, so what are the questions that we want to propose about the end games? Natural selection, which is allegedly survival of the fittest species. And the key question that we're asking tonight is well, this is the question. This is the question that that is being proposed by these eugenicists in their function, their social functions. And it was, how do we take those most fit to survive, since natural selection deals with survival of the fittest, this is what their premise or their activity surrounds, this concept. How do we take those most fit to survive, who are those of African descent? How do we take those via self-controlled evolution and make them least fit to survive? This is why you have an out-of-Africa theory. This is why you have the cousin of the man who proposed the out-of-Africa theory, Francis Galton, coming with the concept of eugenics. This is why you have a Planned Parenthood. This is why you have black women who have no civilization, who are savage as hell, who open their legs for anybody because they haven't been taught the culture of civilization.